Coming up on this week's RegCast.
This is a big problem area for industry. We know that you guys spend a lot of money on this. And as you said, PJ, some of the numbers you've quoted, particularly at the start, are pretty eye-watering, not just in terms of kind of implementation costs, but also fines. And we really see this as an opportunity, from our perspective, for industry to come and tell us and work with us to solve these problems. And say, let's take a step back and let's say, look, let's rather than constantly, as we always seem to do, try to apply quick fixes, let's take a step back and let's say, actually, if this is going to work, if we want it to work properly, how should this work? Taking into account all the views of all the people involved in this process. And that's primarily the ask for you right now, is come and get involved and help us design the future of reporting and data collection in a way that benefits yourselves and benefits us too.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the value proposition is huge, but also and that's partly because the problem space is huge. So I think if we look at what we see happening, over the last few years, the amount of data that we've needed to exchange with regulators, is effectively a one-way escalator. And we're covering new areas of business. The SFTR regulation went live last year. We're both broadening out and we're going deeper. MiFID 3 at some point will be on us, and so on. So I think there's a constant desire to understand, how can we do what we do, but without it, becoming some sort of ever increasing, both in terms of numbers of people, but in terms of complexity type of problem.
It's all about native, right? It's about how you're using data in the BAU, business as usual process, right? We want as little transformation between what we use in our business and what we send to our regulator as possible, okay? The less times we touch the data between when it's used and when we send it, the less risk we take, okay? And the more transparency we provide.
But in order to achieve that, I think there's a kind of a Gordian knot of problems that you've got to cut through. So the standard supervisory practice in my time, and I doubt it's changed very much, is that the easiest conversation to have with a chief executive or someone senior from a firm is to use their MI. You talk about your, so back at the ranch, back at the bank or the FCA, you do your comparisons across the regulatory returns data, and that gives you some kind of picture, although as we increasingly are discovering, it's not sufficiently granular, and actually you've got this basket of fruit thing going on. So you're not actually looking at consistency in the way that, way back when I used to imagine I was.
Welcome to RegCast.
RegCast,
where we shine a light on banking digitization. Hi, welcome to RegCast. I'm PJ DiGiamarino, CEO and founder of JWG. And welcome back to the hundreds of listeners that have found us already. And we really look forward to having you with us as we shine this spotlight on key regulatory pain points that are focused on regulatory reporting. This episode, we want to go back and figure out what's happening with the transformation plans out there in the industry today. There's a lot changing, but this isn't a new story. In 2012, JWG published a paper called Dirty Windows. It was really one of the first times that anyone looked at the consolidated impact of transparency post-financial crisis. And we found a really ugly picture. It was roughly 33 billion euro being spent in Europe across the patch on a number of new regulations and reporting, but it didn't look to us like it was going to achieve its objective. We talked about the illusion of control. Everybody thought that they were going to be able to control the system, but there was this fear of garbage in, gospel out, and a lot of things that didn't look quite right at the time. Since then, there's been a series of fines and then a whole effort to look at how do we think about getting better quality data. But those fines have been big. I mean, the city was fined 44 million by the PRA. The OCC hit them in the US for 400 million. JP Morgan got a $250 million fine. So these aren't small numbers, and there are really big problems. And I think the globally significantly important banks are being asked to try to figure this out. And I guess the good news is that, even during COVID, we started to see a lot of energy in this space. And really the G20 tech sprint really helped kind of pick an approach and a winner for the way to think about this. But there are European efforts that are also in that space, and we have also obviously have our friends here in the UK. So I wanted to quickly, without further ado, introduce our speakers, and then we'll go into what they're thinking about the regulatory space. Angus, could you please just quickly introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi all, I'm Angus. I lead the bank's data collection transformation efforts. This is a really big program of work that we've got ongoing that covers all the data that we collect across regulatory, statistical, and markets and banking purposes. And it's really about setting the bank's long-term strategic direction for data collection, and certainly trying to address, in collaboration with industry, many of the issues, PJ, that you've been describing just now.
Thanks, Angus. And Adam, could you just please introduce your role?
Yes, I'm Adam Turnbull. I co-run the global regulatory engineering team at Goldman Sachs. So I'm responsible for all aspects of non-financial regulatory reporting. And have a particularly keen interest in the digitalisation topic. I've been working with a number of the others on this panel over the last year. Prior to that, I spent a number of years upstream, effectively in the equities business.
Thank you. And Dawd.
Hello, PJ. So my name's Dawd Haque. I run a function within Deutsche Bank called Global Market Initiatives, Regulatory Transformation and Strategy. I also am a member of the DSB ANA Product Committee, ISO IST 12, the UK Financial Services Committee, and I'm on other standards bodies as well as some of our market infrastructure boards. And,
I often find it's easier, Dawd, to name the boards you're not part of.
and this is a passion of mine, is making regulatory reporting a better, more efficient mechanism, which provides better transparency to our regulators.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you for being here today. Gavin, last but not least, you played a key role in all this. Why don't you explain it to people?
Hi, so I'm a director in the Financial Services Group at Grant Thornton, and I played a part of a Scrum Master for the 2-week bank FCA tech sprint at the end of 2017, which you were involved in, PJ, and obviously kept close an eye on the whole thing since then. Before that, I worked for the regulators for 27 years. So Bank of England, FSA, FCA, including 12 years as supervisor. So I'm familiar with quite a lot of the issues that are kind of underlie a lot of this.
Yeah, I guess for my part, you mentioned the 2017, but we realized then that our history went back a lot further than that, because I started the first reporting initiative for MiFID 1 back in 2005, and I think you were actually on the other side at that time, even though we never actually met. So there's been a lot of collaboration in this space, for good and for bad. But I guess, Gavin, let's give you the floor first. What urgency have you seen in the regulatory efforts to fix the regulatory plumbing issues, and how well is the sector coming together right now?
So I think urgency is probably the wrong word, if you don't mind my saying so. I think when the regulators do something urgently, then things really do move quickly, and you've seen that with COVID. So this is not quite what we're talking about, but I think what you have seen is a reasonable amount of pace. So since the original tech sprint back in 2016, things have moved on. There was a longer one. There was a pilot. The Bank of England had its future finance paper in 2019. There was a DP at the start of last year. And obviously there's been Brexit and COVID going on in the interim. So you can see the kind of progression, and it feels to me like it's been as much about, and I wouldn't underestimate the scale of this task, building consensus within the two regulators that this is the right way to go, because actually it is quite a major shift in terms of resources and how they focus on things, and it will probably change their own operating models quite fundamentally, as well as the impact it will have on the industry. I mean, I think looking more widely, people have kind of pitched in as and when asked, and I think that's going to continue to be the pattern for a while until we get to the kind of the scaling up phase of this, which is, let's say, 2 years down the line as a minimum. So there's a long way to go. It feels like we've kind of all got to the starting line, So I wouldn't underestimate what's already happened, but I think the real challenge is still very much ahead of us.
Adam, what's your perspective? I mean, you've been talking about your engineering function and plumbing around this space for a while. Do you agree? Are we still really at the starting line?
Yeah, I think there's an enormous amount still to be done. One of the pleasures I have is sitting effectively at the end of the conveyor belt. In terms of my team sit downstream of a whole bunch of really very diverse functions within the bank. And I think that'll be common with lots of other similar institutions. And one of the big challenges for us is, how do we think about the lineage of our data? How do we know that the data that we're getting is what it needs to be? And that's vital in terms of us being able to assert that we have a high quality output. So I guess what can we do about it? We've certainly within GS we've started a number of initiatives. We have a platform called Pure, which is effectively a data modeling platform that we use internally. And that makes data modeling accessible to people who are non-engineers. And we've been really working through trying to get from front to back so we can get that plumbing that you talked about, PJ, so that actually right from inception of somebody writes a new product, a new payoff, we can actually link that all the way down through into my system and into the output and into the output beyond. So look, I think that's vital, and I think we'll come back to it a little bit later on when we talk. I expect we'll talk a bit more about common data standards. And look, it's all great having a common data standard externally, but we've got to be able to marry that up with what happens internally within the bank. And so that's a key area of focus for us. Where are we on it? Yeah, look, I think still somewhere towards the beginning of that journey. But look, parts of the flow are more advanced than others. We've made a lot of progress on OTC derivatives, and we now need to see some of that progress be replicated in kind of other areas of what we do.
Yeah, I'm glad you called out the derivative space. Dawd has been sitting on many of those committees. If he comes off mute, I'm sure he can tell us more about what the engagement has been like there. But I'd like to understand more from him. Where do you think we are in the standards engagement right now, Dawd?
So PJ, I mean, I want to go back to something Gavin said earlier, right? It's taken us now since 2008 to 2021 to get our shoes on and get to the starting line. Okay, we've done our laces up, and we are checking ourselves and getting ready. That's where we are. So what we needed to do between 2008 and 2021 is exactly what Adam said. It's standards. It's both internal standards and it's external standards. It's interoperability between those two. It's creating the foundational blocks on which we build a solution which provides transparency to our regulators in a normalized data way, right? So that everybody can understand we're talking apples with apples, not as we do today. It's a basket of fruit and it turns into a vase. And that's essentially what we've been giving the regulators since 2008. If we look at the aggregate across the industry, okay. Now, what we're doing in the standards point of view is the FSB in 2008 set CPMRSCO a task of putting together a global data standard, and for OTC derivatives and the reporting of them. And so that's called the
data entities.
It's called data elements. Sorry. So we've got the UTI, the UPI, unique product identifier, unique transaction identifier, and now this critical data elements data dictionary. So that's just how you define a derivative. And what we're doing now is trying to transpose that or overlay that onto our internal models, as Adam said, around how we describe a product internally. And then we want to standardize how we express that out to the market. So that's where we are with that. I'm working, as I said, I've just joined the DSB ANA product committee. We're revamping ISINs, we're creating the UPI, ISINs for OTC derivatives, the UPI for OTC derivatives. Something I want to come back to that Adam said, and it's something I forget because I sit in a silo. My silo is derivatives. It's where I spent my entire career in derivatives. But there's a lot more out there. There's a lot of products beyond derivatives. We saw derivatives as being the bomb that exploded in 2008, but actually, you know, there's securities, there's fixed income products, there's cash products like FX, loans, which are things that we are yet to even start to go down the route of standardizing and creating models for. So we are indeed, we're at the starting line for OTC derivatives standardization, but we haven't even got off the bench for these other products yet. And so there is a lot further we need to go. And what we'd like to do is create the standards we're using for OTC derivatives, we want to use in these other areas as well, so that we can leverage all the experience we've gained here where it's appropriate.
Thank you. Thank you for extending the analogy into getting to this starting line with shoes ready, but we've been throwing fruit at each other and drinking from vases. So I guess that's a very interesting mix to throw to Angus and say, well, you've had this great project. You've been looking at the data transformation space for, 18 months or so. What is your plan all about? And how do you see this transforming, Angus? What have you concluded?
Sure. And I think in answering that question, it'd be good to pick up a bit of what Gavin, Dawd, and Adam were saying as well around this idea of kind of urgency, and how long is it taking us to get to this point, and what particularly what I'm focused on right now is where do we want to get to, and how long is it going to take us to get there. And I think one of the things that really strikes me that perhaps hadn't been done over the last sort of 10 years, particularly post-crisis, was people really taking a fundamental hard look at how do we do this process efficiently. There was a lot of sort of new initiatives, and there was a great deal of urgency and a great deal of delivery, but there was, I think, perhaps some things were a bit rushed, and we didn't necessarily focus on the goals and the outcomes and whether or not we were going to achieve those. And also, we didn't really take a step back and say, well, actually, what's the fundamental infrastructure we need to make this work? And I think that's really what we've been trying to do with the Bank of England's transformation work, particularly the review we carried out last year, is really taking a step back and say, what's the fundamentals we need to deliver data collection or reporting well and efficiently, both for us and for industry. And when we think about that, where there's kind of three big fundamental reforms that we think need to happen. One is common data standards, and Dawd and Adam have already talked about this. And we see this as all about, at a very sort of granular, very operational level, data being standardized in how it's described and identified within firms. Secondly, modernizing reporting instructions, and this is really talking about how do we communicate what it is that we're working for, what it is that we require to industry and to firms. And there's a range of things that we could do here, and some of them are already being explored, particularly in the derivative space, around potentially sort of machine executable instructions or instructions as code. And finally, I think it's fair to say that reporting in particular up to this point has been a pretty siloed process, where depending on which bit of a regulator you work for, a central bank, or depending on which jurisdiction you sat in, you tended to kind of do reporting in quite a similar way. A siloed way, and we really think that we need to be much more joined up across the different areas of the bank and across the different areas of different authorities that do reporting. And also we need to be much more joined up with industry, and we need to much more think about how the way we ask for data impacts industry's ability to supply that data, and vice versa. And so that's kind of our reform agenda. That's what we think needs to happen over particularly the next 10 years, for us to really deliver the kind of data collection process and reporting process I think we all would like to have. We do think it's a 10-year program, because we do see this as pretty fundamental infrastructure changes that need to happen within industry, that are quite profound and quite wide-ranging, and like any big serious infrastructure project that is worth doing, quite frankly, you just can't do that overnight. And if you try and push it too hard, you can spend a lot of money, but with not a lot of output and not a lot of benefit. And that's why really, when we're thinking about our approach, we want to take a relatively incremental approach. we see this as a long-term multi-phase piece of work. We see this as something which is, hopefully, ideally, something we do in collaboration with industry and with other regulators, and kind of we do globally. Though perhaps not in a formal way, perhaps via a number of different initiatives, which have some which interact and that we collaborate together on, but aren't necessarily formally connected. And in the short term, for us, that really looks like a joint transformation program that we're setting up with industry, where we want to work together with industry and actually the FCA as well, to look at what does a sort of the long-term solution for data standards and for reporting look like.
And what do you see as the short-term goal? Where are the benefits? Because I know you're asking for resource, so the people are trying to evaluate that business case. What do people get for pitching in here?
I mean, I think the first thing is particularly for those in industry, we know that this is a big problem area for industry. We know that you guys spend a lot of money on this, and as you said, PJ, some of the numbers you've quoted, particularly at the start, are pretty eye-watering, not just in terms of kind of implementation costs, but also fines. And we really see this as an opportunity, from our perspective, for industry to come and tell us and work with us to solve these problems. And say, let's take a step back and let's say, look, let's rather than constantly, as we always seem to do, try to apply quick fixes, let's take a step back and let's say, actually, if this is going to work, if we want it to work properly, how should this work? Taking into account all the views of all the people involved in this process. And that's primarily the ask for you right now, is come get involved and help us design the future of reporting and data collection in a way that benefits yourselves and benefits us too.
That's great. So Adam, let's turn to you now. I mean, you've got a lot of stakeholders internally to manage. What do you see the value proposition from the Bank of England here in the UK and this engagement and the type of proposition that you're then shopping globally to all the organization?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the value proposition is huge, but also and that's partly because the problem space is huge. So I think if we look at what we see happening, over the last few years, the amount of data that we've needed to exchange with regulators, is effectively a one-way escalator. And we're covering new areas of business. The SFTR regulation went live last year. We're both broadening out and we're going deeper. MiFID III at some point will be on us, and so on. So I think there's a constant desire to understand, how can we do what we do, but without it, becoming some sort of ever increasing, both in terms of numbers of people, but in terms of complexity type of problem. So I think the value proposition here is, this is actually about how do you set this thing up. And I think, Angus was right to call out 10 years. It's going to take a long time, but, get to the point where, we want to be able to exchange accurate data. We want to be able to exchange timely data. We want to be able to solve a number of those issues. And it's clear, I think, if you look at the framework that we've had, I think we've done a reasonable job clearly with all the with all the things that have been going on. But there's an enormous amount of room for improvement, right? You cited at the beginning, PJ, some of the the challenges that the industry has had with this. So I think in terms of, where do we start? It's also, how do we link some of what we're doing here? Reporting doesn't exist in a bubble, right? What we're trying to report is ultimately real things that have happened, that the bank has done. And, so actually one of the challenges is, how, if we take the data standards piece, how do we start to evolve that into a data standard that's not just about, the pieces, say that, Dawd and I as practitioners are interested in, but also is used as part of our BAU process. There are many other use cases where, as a bank, we'll need to exchange information with our counterparts, settlements, confirmations, all sorts of other things. And I feel much more comfortable when we can base our reporting on data that is kind of shared with other use cases. So I think, in terms of the value proposition, it's actually about expanding this a little bit beyond reporting and bringing in some of the other stakeholders who we wouldn't necessarily have worked with previously, and getting them bought into the value of some of these data standards. And that's where I think the work that we've done in partnership with ISDA on the common domain model has been incredibly valuable. But look, I think it's hard, right? And it won't, and I think, Dawd alluded to this, I think in derivatives, we're fortunate, we have a head start, some of this external model exists. there are other areas of our activity, that are really hardly mapped at all. And I think, Angus, I know you ran the exercise to look at the different public use cases that we might look at. And actually that's quite interesting because it takes us into, some other areas in terms of, statistical reporting and liquidity reporting and the like, so I think that's a big challenge in terms of persuading and bring people on board. Can we do all this simultaneously? So again, I think we go back to some of the kind of the incremental steps. I think the other thing, final point I'd probably make is sharing common practice with other people, mutualizing interpretation, mutualizing some of that work. That's actually very attractive to us, because I think it's not just because it may make things cheaper. I mean, hopefully that is a result, but also because I think it will ultimately drive up accuracy and it will drive down the inconsistencies that we see at the moment in interpretation, right? And I think if you think about that from a supervisory perspective, that has to be a good thing. If we've got reporting from two counterparts, they've taken the same interpretation, they've worked off of the same common starting point, that's very helpful. So look, I think there's a lot in there to get people engaged, but we have to keep making that case.
Can I comment quickly on that point, Adam,
Please.
particularly about the broader benefits? Because I think this is a really interesting point. The Bank of England currently has two big external sort of forward-looking innovation forums engaging with industry, one on post-trade processing and the other one on artificial intelligence. And on both of those forums, one of the critical conversations that's been happening is for these to work, for us to improve post-trade processing and for industry to really maximize the benefits of artificial intelligence, machine learning in their operations and their processes, we need to sort out some fundamental data management issues, and we need data standards to really make progress on tackling those issues. And so again, you just get to the same underlying fundamental issues that we see in reporting.
And I was at an ISLA conference yesterday, chairing a panel on digitalization. And actually, digitization was different than digitalization, I learned yesterday. But, Dawd, I mean, the fundamental there is the understanding, right? A lot of these reports ask for data point. And people can have lots of different views about what that data point might mean. But, can you talk a bit about how you see these new digital tools helping everyone mutualize the understanding so that we're not talking apples and oranges anymore, and we all understand what a beautiful apple looks like?
No, not really. So I want to go. I mean, Adam has summarized a lot of my thoughts perfectly there. I could just walk away now and be happy that the message has been given. It's all about native, right? It's about how you're using data in the BAU, business as usual process, right? We want as little transformation between what we use in our business and what we send to our regulator as possible, okay? The less times we touch the data between when it's used and when we send it, the less risk we take, okay? And the more transparency we provide. There are two things there, though, that the view that we have of how we use our data internally needs to be the same lens the regulator uses on that data when they get it, okay? They can't project onto our data decisions that don't come fundamentally from the data. And that, unfortunately, is something I think there is still a problem with today, is that certain regulatory regimes and certain obligations are asking for certain data points and then using that to make decisions which don't come naturally from that data in that scenario. Because when we think about execution, trade execution, every trade execution doesn't happen in a void. It happens in a specific scenario with two specific actors who are aiming for a specific goal from that transaction, from that engagement. When we provide data to a regulator, we strip away all of that context, all of the color of what's happening in that transaction and who the actors really, or what the actors are trying to achieve from that. So we have to be careful. It's the same as when we talk about derivatives in general, really, is we have to be careful about what data we're providing and what answers that they will get from that data. So it's all contextual. And when we talk about standards, what we're talking about is putting a standard onto those scenarios so that we give the richness of data to the regulator that allows them to understand the context of what we're doing. And what we talk about when we talk about standards is everybody providing the data in the same from the same scenario in the same context. And so we separate out the different scenarios and we provide the data to allow them to understand each of those scenarios. So that's what we mean by standards, and what from a trading and from an execution perspective. Now, on top of that, obviously, regulators don't want to reduce the number of requests for data that they provide to us or ask us to do. So they aggregate data points. So they say, okay, I don't just want the economic data points that are to do with this execution. I want some additional data. I want to know, for example, how long it took to confirm that trade. I want to know things like who is the beneficiary on that trade, not just who are the two people in the execution. So they're asking for more data around it, and they're making other decisions from it. And what we want to do is standardize those data points, because actually, if we just purely look at economics, we have a standard data model for that, right? It's all the stuff around it that we are struggling to create those data models for. And then to Adam's point earlier, and also Angus's, as soon as we step away from OTC derivatives, which is where we do, where we've done this for the last 10 years and built these models up, they don't exist. So when the Bank of England wants a new liquidity report, we need to first implement a set of standards on which everybody operates and everybody understands, so that the data points that are going into the Bank of England are standardized, and so that they get a better result out of the event.
Dawd, Gavin's been laughing while you've been talking. I think I know the reason why. Because on the last episode, he was the one talking about data silos actually being more like data archipelagos, because when the FCA was saying we needed to actually have dashboards, that's when it all needs to come together. And I guess, Gavin, that's not the Bank of England, that's the FCA, different regulator, but it must sound kind of familiar here, right? I mean, what's the way to think about it from a regulatory observation point of view? And is there a way that this can come together and bridge your islands?
It's a different version of some of the same, of fundamentally the same issues. So I think what Dawd just said about as little transformation as possible from what the bank sees to what the regulator sees is really at the core of this. But in order to achieve that, I think there's a kind of a Gordian knot of problems that you've got to cut through. So the standard supervisory practice in my time, and I doubt it's changed very much, is that the easiest conversation to have with a chief executive or someone senior from a firm is to use their MI. You talk about your, so back at the ranch, back at the bank or the FCA, you do your comparisons across the regulatory returns data, and that gives you some kind of picture, although as we increasingly are discovering, it's not sufficiently granular, and actually you've got this basket of fruit thing going on. So you're not actually looking at consistency in the way that, way back when I used to imagine I was. So that, knowing that's been a bit of a damascene conversion for me. And actually, I think, accuracy and consistency of data that you get from firms that you're able to discuss with firms, I think is a really, really big issue for regulators, and will only become a bigger one going forwards. So I think getting to the point where actually, what Dawd's just described for his firm is equally what Adam's talking about for his, and then Angus can sit and look at them both and know that he can make a meaningful comparison and with other firms and get a picture across the sector or the industry that actually makes sense and will hold up. That's kind of the holy grail. But at the moment, we're looking at the same things partially and from different angles. And then it's really, really hard for everyone involved to actually infer any kind of conclusion from that.
Can I pick up on this point quickly, Gavin? Because I think again this is really important. And we have this difficulty between the moment where we have standardized approaches, which seem to be standardized, but actually the underlying data is probably not very standard, and yet we don't really understand why. And then we have MI, which isn't standardized by definition. But then we're like, well, how do we track back between the MI between different firms, and how do we actually go about comparing this data? And I think one of the things that I think about a lot is the data often we're looking at, and we want actually, particularly for prudential regulatory purposes, which is the PRA's core business, is aggregate data. We want the cross-firm view. But to be able to reconcile and do those comparisons properly, we need to have the underlying fundamental building blocks in a much better place, in a much more consistent place, that will allow us to understand much better, okay, what is happening, why are the differences that exist between these different reports. And that speaks to Dawd's point about sort of derivatives and much more fundamental underlying activities happening.
So last year with COVID must have been really difficult in that sort of context, because you're getting you want all this information in, and you need to be able to compare it, but you're not comparing like with like a lot of the time.
I mean, I can't talk for my supervisory colleagues, but I think that these in an emergent situation, you just kind of have to trust, I would guess, the data that you have. And you're right. I mean, there's a whole bunch of sins that you just don't know about. You can't see. It's all unknown unknowns. Because at the end of the day, you get an Excel spreadsheet or you get a template of data. How that's put together, what's gone into it, how good it is or not, you have very little transparency as far as I can see.
Can I come in with an example here? So something, even if we look at OTC derivatives and we think about that. So MiFID II, a transparency regime on price, right? Surveillance, right? Execution surveillance. Now, one of the fields that they ask for is execution time. People would say, well, that's easy, right? What is execution time? It's simple, but it's not, right? It's not simple at all. So what is execution time? Is it a time where the trader and the counterpart say done on the phone? Well, firstly, there are multiple ways of executing within a bank, right? You can get onto an electronic platform. You can go through a broker. You can do it over the phone, right? You can do it via a third party. You can do it in DMA. So you do self-executing DMA is direct market access. Okay, so there's multiple ways. Depending on the asset class, there are between 6 and a dozen ways of executing. Okay, so then you can say, okay, let's narrow this down and only look at voice execution. What is execution time then? Well, is it the point of time where the trader and the counterpart say done on the phone? Okay, or is it the time when the trader enters the trade onto a sales blotter? Is it the time where the salesman who actually does make who's doing the transaction with the counterpart says done? Or is it when they go to their trader and then they get a price and they go back to the counterpart and say, here is the price on that trade? Is that the time of execution time? Is it when the middle office person books the trade into the trading system? Because the first time it's electronically captured is at that point in time. Okay, and there is a timestamp on that. Is that now execution timestamp? Okay, is that the execution time? So all of a sudden we've got 5 different versions of execution time for one single field, and every single bank and every single counterpart in the market is choosing a different way to do that execution time, and execution time is a matching field. How do you decide that with your counterpart? Do you have to actually on the phone when you say done and then agree what the execution time is? Execution time goes down to the millisecond. How are we going to capture that? So
Dawd, I think you captured beautifully the different conversations that go on there. But there's a data point, but it doesn't get described. So there's a lot of noise around how do we agree what it all means.
I've got 150 of them.
Exactly. We have to choose. But someone asked for that one, so how do we pick one? By 2024, just to sum up, what would you like to have happen for that use case? What do you think? If we're sitting here with a magic wand and say, look, we're going to fix this in the next couple of years, what happens?
I wish you hadn't asked me that question about execution time. I haven't got a solution. I've only got the problem. I think there has to be at the and there are several regulatory rooms, so I'll be careful with my language here. There has to be an understanding. There has to be an understanding of how we do what we do, how we do our business, all the different avenues that we do executions over, and this goes back to my point earlier about scenarios, right? We need to have a more nuanced conversation about what data means in different scenarios and what the definition of that data should be. So if I execute over a platform and we both have an agreed price, at that point on the platform, it will timestamp it, right? And that is the execution done.
Thank you, Dawd. I think
If we then go to phone.
But Dawd, let's not keep working the example. I think you gave us a great flavor. We're out of time. Let's summarize what Gavin would do for the next couple of years. What is your big focus in this space, Gavin?
I think it's getting something practical out there. So I think I think the DP that was published a couple of weeks ago is great. It sets stuff out. There's obviously a lot of questions within it, but I think actually getting one of those use cases out there, practical, it almost certainly won't be perfect, but actually it needs to be. There needs to be something in the market for people to kind of understand and work for. And I think also the other thing for me is actually having some kind of more detailed timeline with a kind of target date for it. I think that the challenge for this for me is getting everyone to think beyond, let's say, a 3-year payback horizon for any investment. If this is a 10-year thing, then we need to know what the 10 years looks like. And then firms, I think, will welcome actually the certainty of being able to plan on that basis.
Angus, so does that align with your vision?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think, going back to your question about, what should I do? Well, I mean, certainly if I was someone in industry, I'd be sending an email to data collection DP at bankofengland.co.uk. And saying I want to get involved in industry and the Bank of England and the FCA, getting around the table and saying, what does this solution look like? How do we fix Dawd's problems? And then, as Gavin says, right, okay, now we've got a solution and we've got an idea of what we want to do. Let's go and implement it on our first use cases. And then once we've done that, hopefully we've got a good idea of what we need to do. And then it's just a question of rolling that out to future use cases and really starting to fill in that sort of 10-year roadmap for how do we get from today to our target vision.
That's fantastic. By the way, I'll attach the materials that will give you all the background and Angus's email, to the notes on the JWG website that you can figure out how to do that and hit his bid if you'd like. Adam, I'll leave you a closing comment. What's your view next for 2024?
Yeah, well, I think I just build on what I think the others have talked about. I think it's about we need to get credibility and make sure we can prove that this can work in some cases. I love the fact that we're having a kind of a two-way dialogue. And I think some of the feedback, in the examples that we've just talked about is really important. And I think that's something by mutualizing some of the interpretation, by having the regulators at the table, and I think that's what's hugely exciting. The paper, Angus, that you put out, and it's great to see that the FCA and others are on board. I think let's get something working in the derivative space. Let's then go and try a space we've not worked in. And I think some of the pilots that Angus's report highlights a good opportunity to do that. So I think get something real, prove that it can work, and then I think we can iterate. But it's going to take a long time to go across multiple different spaces. So start with something that's achievable and work it from there.
Fantastic. Thank you all for your summaries. I think that's an excellent way to leave this for everybody. three things to highlight moving forward, guys. We have another RegCast coming up next week on the DRR specifically. So we want to focus on the global derivatives efforts and really dial into what's happening there and how people can get involved in that. We also have the 30th of March. You'll be able to get right from the horse's mouth. The BIS paper author will be presenting what his perspectives are. And we'll also hear about the architects of APRA and their experience in their solution in Australia. And we'll also get the Bank of Italy and the Puma project, but as well some commentary around what's happening with the bird. So lots of different things happening, lots of opportunities to get involved. Stay tuned here to RegCast. Stay glued to the JWG website events, and there will be plenty more to pick up on. And I look forward to catching up with you soon. And thank you for listening, and please subscribe so that you can follow this conversation can keep following you. Thanks, everybody.
You can download the podcast via Spotify, Apple, and Google. But also, I'd encourage people to come to the JWG website, which, as hopefully you will know, is jwg-it.eu. Go to the Intelligence Hub and create your bespoke library. Welcome to RegCast,
where we shine a light on banking digitization.